Hello, my name is Alexis Mitchell, and once again, before I start, to all the people that have viewed the introduction of my journal, Let's Talk Tom, I just want to tell you thank you. Thank you for the support. Just thank you for listening to my story. Actually, my brother's story. Thank you. It means a lot because as I help someone else, I'm healing also. So first of all, I just want to tell everyone thank you for the support and the love that you've shown toward this time of my loss of my brother. Before I go into the video, I want to talk about who Tom was, his character, and I want people to also not look at him as an HIV patient or AIDS patient, but I want people also to know the good person he was. So I'm going to just, as I share these videos, I'm going to share the good and the bad. But I hope that people can separate the sickness from his character. Because though AIDS and my brother, two different people. I mean, two different situations. I'm sorry. Two different situations. And so that's, I just want people to get the positive out of this. But I'm going to talk a little bit about Tom, who he was, what kind of person he was. He was amazing. He was the best brother. I mean, he was so sweet. He was so silly. He loved making people laugh. This is his picture. I don't know if you can see it really good, but if you notice on that picture, he got the biggest smile on his face, and that's who he was. Even from a little boy, he was always smiling. He was so silly. He was so silly. He loved making people laugh. And I think that's what me and him had in common. We love to make people laugh. We goofy people. Love just got this laughter about life. So he was that. And number two, my brother loved God with all he had. Even as a little boy, he desired to please God in any kind of way. I remember when we were children, I went back home yesterday just to go back and look at the apartment complex where we lived and when we grew up. I posted some pictures on Facebook. I went back to look at the apartment, and I went on the back step, and so many memories came up. I grew up in a Pentecostal church. Grew up under strict religion. I will get into that later, but I'm just giving you an idea who he was. I remember as a little girl, we grew up going to church nonstop, and when my brother was not in church, he was playing church. He imitated what he saw in church, and he would get the whole community together. He was about 10 or 12 years. He was small. I was like a little baby. But I remember this stuff. But he would get all the kids in the community, and Tom had this attitude of where he could draw people. And he did. He did. And it's amazing. He got all these children that grew up in the projects, and they ran over my mom's house, and we would all get in the backyard, and everybody was the steps was the benches, and he would get some buckets, and he would play church. So we imitated what we saw, and it was so fun. And it was those days was carefree days. And we would get up and tell our testimony of how what God did for us. I mean, and of course as children, as we was just imitating what we saw, but it was so fun. It was so fun, and it was silly, and we laughed, and I mean, you know, we saw people shouting in the church and jumping around. You know, in Pentecostal churches, you see that, and so we did what we saw, but it was fun. It was childhood memories, and I went back there and I saw that, and it just touched me. It was like, wow. I actually got to go in the apartment. I went and knocked on the door, see who lived there. I went inside, and it just brought back so many good memories. And Tone was always making somebody laugh. He's always making somebody laugh. And that's who he was. And even in his adult life, he was just a silly, happy person. Giving, he was very giving. One thing I can say, he didn't complain. He didn't wear this pity party on him about having this sickness. There are many times he didn't have it. He didn't have the money or whatever. And I remember, you know, I was moving from my hometown to Mobile, and I came up short. And at first my brother was like, no, he was scared. He didn't want his baby sister to leave. And I just told him, I said, I got to do better for my life. And so we talked. He put the money in the bank, and he helped me. You know, now that I'm thinking about it, he helped me pursue my goals and what I wanted to do. So those are the good things that I dwell on to keep my memory, his memory, alive. So I truly believe my brother desired to know God, but he just, like I said in the other video, he just didn't have the right understanding of who God was. And now that I do, I believe that I'm not perfect. I'm not saying I know everything, but I believe that I know enough to truly help somebody. And like I said this in the last video, I don't want to continue the shame, because in my brother's final days of dying, he still was ashamed. He still was in denial of what he had. He still was, instead of saying, okay, I have AIDS, he was quoting scripture saying, I'm healed. And that was just a way to cover up, you know, the shame. And actually, that's one of my topics that I'm going to talk about, is shame. I'm going to talk about my struggle with doing this video, and how did I come to the conclusion of saying I gotta do this. So here it goes. I'm going to take you back to the funeral. The funeral was so hard. The funeral was the hardest thing to do, because on Valentine's Day, I got a call from my oldest brother, and he said, Lex, you know, Tom's heart stopped beating. I was waiting on that phone call, believe it or not. You know, it may sound selfish, it may sound like I wanted him to leave, but that's not true. But I knew his struggle. But I was, in that whole week of him being in the hospital, you know, I was waiting for the end. I was. It may not make sense, but I was waiting for the end, because I was tired as a sister. I was tired. I live in a whole nother state from where he lived, and I knew he had this disease, and I knew he was very private, and I always wondered, you know, is he taking care of himself? Is he doing right by his body? Do he want to live? Wonder how he doing? Many times I tried to call him and he wouldn't pick up the phone. And it was just a worration. So as a sister that loved him so much, and not just me, but everybody that is attached to Tom, it was a worration. Not just me. But when they told me he died, I didn't cry at first. I was waiting on it. I was waiting on him to just not suffer anymore, because we tried to talk to him and we knew, you know, that he had his own ways, he had his own mindset. He wasn't gonna listen. So when I got the phone call that he died, I didn't cry. But as the days up to the funeral, depression hit hard. It hit hard. I remember just crying like a baby. And I started posting it on Facebook because I have childhood friends that I'm friends with, so I posted it saying he died, and it shocked a lot of people. It has shocked. I know it has shocked a lot of people in my home community, but that's when when he died, that's when I started. The shame came to me. Because anytime somebody dies, and we generally do it. Even if I'm asking if somebody died, if somebody tell me somebody died, the first thing I'm gonna ask, what was the matter? What caused them to die? So instantly, when I would talk about him and say my brother died, the first question that people asked was, how did he die? And instantly, the shame come. He was sick. What was wrong with him? He was sick. You know, he was just sick. He had to be sick of something. And so that shame of knowing that he had AIDS came, and you know, you felt the shame. I did. I felt ashamed because I know how people respond to AIDS. I've studied it and I've looked at how it eats up your body, and you know, the shame just came that this was my brother. You know, this was my brother, and my brother, you know, this wasn't supposed to happen to me, because we grew up in the church and we grew up knowing who God was, and all that stuff came to me like, this ain't supposed to be happening to me, because I was raised in church. I was raised, if you love God and if you do everything that you're supposed to do, and even if you do wrong, you're forgiven of the sins of whatever you did. And immediately the shame came. It did. Some people I told, other people I didn't. Because I began to feel like, oh, they just be trying to be nosy. You know, you justify your actions. If you ain't really honest with yourself, you'll put a justification on what you're dealing with. And so I felt myself putting a justification of, if somebody asked, oh, you know, they just trying to be nosy. They just trying to be nosy. They just want to know my business. You know, all those emotions was going through me. And which really, not true. That's not true. So as I went on Facebook, I would paraphrase stuff. I would just put little phrases on there. Be like, don't use the word of God as a drug. I wouldn't come out. I half talk about it. And it you know, it's just, this goes back to how I was raised, being in the church. I'm going to talk about the church part of it and the religion part later on as I go through it. But what really made me break my silence is how he died. How he died. And I know he could have still been living a long time. What made me break my silence is the fact that when my brother told me he had AIDS back in 2004 or 5, when he told me, and I will never forget it, he said, "Oh, Lex, did I tell you? I got HIV, but I'm healed." I'm talking about, was a jaw dropper for me. And I didn't hear the word healed. I heard HIV. I didn't hear healed. I ain't hear no scriptures. I heard HIV. And when he told me, I begged him. I said, "Tom, please get help. Take your medication." "No, I'm healed. I just believe God that I'm healed." I said, "Tom, you can't do that. You cannot. You gotta take your medicine." I even attempted to share my story because I had a sickness. I struggled with epilepsy from 9 to 18. But in those years of having epilepsy, I took medication. And to God be the glory today, I am a living testimony. Epilepsy could have killed me, just like AIDS killed Tom. That's what I want people to recognize, that sickness is a sickness, even though my sickness had to do with my head. And, my brain, his sickness had to do with his immune system. But it still could have killed me. But thanks be to God, by his grace and mercy, I am seizure free. I have not had a seizure in 12, going on 13 years. I can work, I can drive, I can do anything anybody else do. So that's why I feel like I can really tell this story, because I had an experience of sickness. So I was talking to my brother, and I was telling him, you have to take your medicine. And he was like, no, I'm not going to take it. I just believe God, I'm healed. And I said, what made you believe that you was healed? He said, I remember it like it was yesterday. He said, I walked up to the altar. I told the preacher I had HIV. And the preacher said, "You healed. Walk in faith." It still didn't click with me then. It still didn't make sense. I didn't back down and say, okay. I was crying. I got on the phone. I think I called every relative out of panic. I called my sister. I called my brother. I called my mom. And I was so hurt because I was the last one to find out he had HIV. Because everybody felt that as the baby, that I couldn't handle it. But actually, I can handle it. And everybody already knew before I did. And so I was left dealing with the fact that my baby brother had AIDS, had HIV, and they already was ahead on his sickness, and I was left in the dark. So that was hurtful. So I was left dealing with two factors. The fact that I found out last, and that he had HIV. And if you listen to this story, do you see the silence? Do you hear the silence? My mama knew. My oldest brother knew. My sister knew. Of course, Tom knew. But I didn't know. But nobody chose. Everybody kept silent about this sickness. And that's why I'm here today to talk about it. I refuse. If I can't help nobody in my family, if I can help somebody else that's going through depression and having illusions about what AIDS really is, I hope you're watching today. Choose to live. So there everybody was ashamed. And Tom even fixed it to where we couldn't talk about it. If we talked about his sickness, he didn't want to talk to us. He didn't. So after going back to when he died, the shame hit me. And so I had so many emotions. How do I cope with his death? I want to respect my brother's wishes because he was a private person and he was he didn't like everybody in his business. So I struggled with, number one, I struggled with dishonoring my brother. I asked myself, I prayed about it, and I said, God, am I dishonoring Tom by talking about this? Because who he was private, and he did not talk about it. He died in silence. And so I asked myself, would I be offending his memory? Number two, I struggled to talk about it is because he have children and he have an ex-wife. And I clarified on the last video, he don't have it. By the grace of God, she don't have it. I will not share her story because when she's ready to talk about it, then she will talk about it. But I'm talking from my experience, but I do want to put that out there that they are covered, and that's a miracle. That's a miracle. Number two, like I said, the second reason was he have children. And I didn't want people to look down on my niece or nephew. Or I still consider this woman my sister. I didn't want people to look down on her. I didn't want to embarrass her. That's the second reason why shame came. I'm like, I don't want people looking at my family, his children like that. They're children. Third reason is I went into shame is because of my mom. The fact that I have a Christian background and how I was raised. We didn't talk about stuff like this. We used scriptures to cover it. Well, they always say he in a better place. True, he is in a better place. But we are left here on earth to deal with his puzzles, with his pieces. And we have to live. And so, yeah, he in a better place. Thank God. He made it. He's in a better place. But I'm still living, and I have to cope with this. I'm still living. So those are some of the reasons why I went into shame. Also, another reason I went into shame is because my hometown where I grew up and all childhood people that knew Tom, a lot of people looked up to Tom. And I was like, if I told it, would they view him? Would they just love Tom for who he is, or would they view him different? So after praying really hard, I said, you know what?